Okay, and welcome to the second video here on our basic sentence diagramming. And we're going to be diagramming two simple sentences in this video. And the first one you can see here is John 11:35. It's basically just two words, and so that's about as basic as it gets for diagramming. So we're going to keep it short and simple here. And then in the second one, it's a little bit more I don't even want to say complex, but it contains a few more elements that we really kind of need to go over, such as prepositional phrases and compound direct object. I think it would be good to learn how to do that. But before we do, we need to kind of go over some of these shapes here. I'm just going to explain a little bit about the sentence diagramming module here. I don't know if you've ever used it. I don't know how long you've had Logos, but you do need to be familiar with some of these shapes, and they're pretty basic. This little arrow here is, and matter of fact, if you run your cursor over each shape or each portion, it will tell you what it is. And this selection here, anytime you want to move a word or drag it or whatever, this needs to be highlighted. You can see this little blue box around it. And then I can take this word, I can move it anywhere I want. I can drag whole portions if I want to. If I want to move the whole thing at one time, I can take my mouse and drag and click, and then I can move the whole thing as long as I have this selection tool selected. And then of course here, this T is for text. You just click on that, and then when you click in the box, you'll see the cursor. And then here you can type anything you want, and it will become a whole entire unit. Then you can take it, you see these shape handles here. You can take it and move it, highlight it like that, and you can move it anywhere, do anything with it. You can link it up to other words, do whatever. Sometimes it's necessary to kind of type in implied subjects, or a lot of times you may see something like this in a diagram. Let me do this. You may see something like this sitting on a diagram. Usually that means there's some kind of an implied word. Most of the time it's used for subjects. So like for imperative commands like Peter pray. Or, no, I'm sorry, not Peter pray. If you just had the word pray, you would diagram that with this as the subject, because the understood word there is you pray. So that's typically what that's used for. Sometimes you might have to supply a word or feel like you need to clarify something. You can use the text to just kind of make a note and point to it, point to whatever you're trying to point out. And of course the pencil here is for drawing, and you can kind of draw any shape you want. And you notice that when I did that, even with a curve, a little bit of curve in it, it recognizes the shape that I'm trying to draw. And you can draw pretty much any shape you want. So if I wanted to draw a square, oh, well, that shows you how good my drawing is. I tried to draw a square, and it turned out to be a circle. Let me see if I can do that again. Okay. Wow, I'm horrible. There you go. There's a square right there. You saw a circle. You can kind of draw anything like that. It makes a little angle bracket. Any kind of shape, it'll usually recognize it. Anyway, that's what that is used for. Let me erase all of this off the screen here so we can get a clean canvas. And all I'm doing is selecting multiple objects by holding down the command button while holding down, while clicking on them, and I can just erase them all at one time. Here, these are pretty much, well, this is if you want to draw a straight line. And then you have here, you can change how it looks, dash, dot. You can change the color of it, pretty much any color you want. You can change the weight of it. You can give it arrows on one end or both ends. Just a number of things you can do with it. These are pretty explanatory. You have arrows. These are shapes. Now these are really the shapes we really need to discuss and kind of get into, because they're the ones that are going to be holding each individual word in our line diagram. And so this first one here is a subject and predicate, and basically a predicate is just another way of saying a verb. So if you wanted to diagram a sentence, the first thing you always want to really do is find your subject and your verb, your main subject and your main verb. And then you would just take this and click on it. Once you click, you just drag it. You ain't got to hold it or anything. You just drag it out and then click on it again to hold it in place. And then it shows you the labels to put on there. And so subject and a verb, and that's what you would do. Subject and a verb, and a diagram always starts with a straight line and a line down the middle, just protruding below the line here to show you the subject and the verb. And then this here would be your direct object. And remember, we talked about direct objects in the last one, and a direct object is something that receives the action of the verb. So you could click that, and then you could build a whole entire sentence. So let's do a practice sentence here. And I've got to type each word individually. So let's just say John, and then I have to come up with another. I'm just going to copy this word John and repaste it because I can change it. Double click in there to change it, and then highlight it. John walked. And then we'll move this down here. Do this again. John walked home. Okay, so that's a very simple sentence. And this is really, well, no, let's do something else. I'll do something like that later. Let me say John walked the dog. I was gonna do that sentence, and I was gonna try to explain something about there are certain verbs that don't transfer action, and actually John 11:35 is a good example of that. This is a verb, and it's not transferring any action anywhere. But we'll get into that a little bit later, maybe in another video. But so the first thing you want to do is you want to find your subject and your verb and your direct object. And so we have walked as our verb, so we know that goes right there. Then we remember how we find our subject is we asked who or what of the verb, and so that would be who or what walked, and obviously the answer is John. So we replace John there. And then the direct object, we've asked who or what of the subject and the verb. So John walked who or what, and the answer would be dog. And so this would be kind of how you set up your simple sentence diagram. Now we have one word left, and I said in a line diagram every word has to be accounted for. And so basically what we want to do with this word is we want to find out, okay, what is this modifying? And when I say the word modify, I mean just what word does this naturally belong to? And we know it belongs to dog because it's the dog. And so now we have to place this word underneath of dog, and we need to have a shape for that. And that's what these little things down here are for, these four things. And you have simple modifier with an object. Then you have a predicate modifier, and then you have a predicate modifier with an object. Now, typically, some people would be really, really uptight and want to use every single shape properly, but as long as I place them underneath where they're modifying, I typically use these two shapes right here. And this one here I use for modifiers like this. I'll use them for articles, I'll use them for adjectives, for adverbs, for anything. Now if I want to really get down to it, sometimes I'll use something like this for an article, and then I'll use this straight one maybe for an adverb. It just depends. You can kind of, most of these are going to be the same, because you see down here a partial modifier and a partial modifier with an object, but most of the time you're just going to use one or two of these. At least that's what I do. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. I'm going to drag it over here because this word dog here is being modified by the. It's telling us exactly which dog, definitively, so definite article, dog. It's not just general, it's not just a dog, it's the dog. And so it modifies this word dog, and so that's where this would be. And so that's kind of what a simple sentence would look like, with a subject, a verb, an object, and then a modifier with the direct object. And if you go check out that site, Grammar Revolution, English Grammar Revolution is the name of the site. If you don't remember the web address or can't get to it, just Google it. You type in English Grammar Revolution, and that'll probably be the first hit you get. But anyway, they'll explain to you the different five different sentence patterns. It's a simple, it's a complex, it's a compound complex, and just all kinds of stuff. We're not really going to get into that. I'm just trying to keep it as simple as possible. But for a basic sentence, you're usually going to have a subject, verb, direct object, and any modifiers that go along with those. So say if I said John the large man, John would still be up here, but the large man would be modifying who John is, and so I would put that under here. And we're going to have some prepositional phrases and things like that we're going to do here in Genesis 1:1, and so hopefully it'll all come together for you. But let me go ahead and just delete all of these things, so that way we can kind of get back to what we're doing here. Voila, there we go. Okay, so those are the main basic shapes you're going to use. These little rockets here look like rockets. It says left conjunction and a right conjunction. Basically what those are is when you have a compound subject or a compound verb and direct objects, and that's basically what you're going to use them for. And we're going to see one of these come into play when we get here to Genesis 1:1. But let's go ahead and just do real simple diagram. We're going to start with John 11:35. So let me drag the heading right over here, and I'm going to leave these here for a minute, and we're going to diagram here. So the first thing we need to do is, there's going to be a subject and a verb. So the first thing we need to do is we need to go over here and we need to pick the right shape. So that'd be subject and predicate. And we can do this. And so the first thing we do in a sentence is what? We find the verb. And obviously the verb is wept. And so we would drop that right in there. Now we find the subject by asking who or what wept. And the answer would be Jesus. Okay. So there you go. There is John 11:35 diagrammed. It might seem a little bit simple, but this is, believe it or not, constitutes an entire sentence. And it constitutes a sentence because you can say this, Jesus wept, and it makes complete sense. It's a complete thought. Anytime you have a complete thought, you have what is called an independent clause. And actually, that may be something I should have gone over in the basic grammar section, and it just hit me. So what I will do in the next video is I will go over independent clauses before we get into the more complex diagramming. So, but just for now, know that two words, as long as you have a subject and a verb, that make a complete thought, it's a complete sentence. It can be a clause. Now, if I were just to have the word is here, Jesus is, that would not be a complete sentence. But if I had Jesus is, and then put the equative verb in here, or the object in here, Jesus is Lord, then that would be a complete clause. That would be a clause in a sentence, I guess I should say. But anyway, let's get to a more complex one here. Let's go to Genesis 1:1, because this has got some things in it that we're going to have to really think about here. You got prepositional phrases, and if you need to really understand what a prepositional phrase is, again, I would highly encourage you to go to the website English Grammar Revolution, and you can just type in the search prepositional phrase, and it will tell you all about prepositions. It will give you a list of prepositions to be on the lookout for. It's almost going to be impossible to go over every single part of speech in these videos, but just know that you diagram prepositional phrases and their objects a little bit differently than you do subjects and verbs, and that's what we're going to go over right now. So first thing we need to do is we need to get our subject and our verb shape, which would be this one. So let's go ahead and do this. And so let's read this verse here. We have, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And so the first thing we need to do is we need to find our verb. That's always the easiest, to start with the verb. And so we see the word created. We know that's a verb. And so we're going to drop this over here. And then we're going to ask ourselves, who or what created? And the answer would be God created. And all we're doing is just following the sentence here. So God created. And then, do we have any direct objects? God created who or what? Well, here it says heavens and the earth. And so what we have here is we have a compound direct object. So it's not just one thing that God created. It's two things, at least by the sentence. So in our shapes, we're not going to use this, which is what we would normally use if it was just a single direct object. Well, we can't use that because it's a compound. And so we're going to have to use one of these little rockets. And since it's going to be on to the right side, we're going to use the one where the point is facing left. So where it says left conjunction. So we need to take this. And I did forget to mention, and let me show you this real quick. On all your shapes, drag one out. If you look, I don't know if you can see it. Maybe I'll zoom in so you can see it a little bit better. You see these blue dots here. You can take these and hold them and drag them. And drag them where you want to make these larger as you need. So all the shapes have them. And you should be able to do that with all of them. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take these ends here and we're going to try to kind of drag them out, because it's kind of going to need a little bit of room. So God created what? God created heavens. So I'm going to drop that here, and your conjunction here is going to go into the little cone here, to the middle of the cone. And He created heavens and earth. So we have our compound direct object here. Let me get rid of these real quick, and then we'll continue on. But you have a compound object. Now we have two modifiers here. We have two words, two definite articles, the. So God created what? The heavens and the earth. And so we need to go ahead and do our modifiers, because they're under each one. The. And then again, if you don't like it being so long or taking up so much space, you can always shorten them out here. And the earth. Now in Logos, I have a tendency to drop the word on there before I try to shorten it out. So because when you do, you notice that the label that it was showing automatically disappeared, and then I'll adjust everything after that. And so the definite article the, you had one of them modifying heavens or pointing back to heavens. I guess it would be a more simple term, and then one of them pointing back to earth. So now we need to figure out what to do with this here. This is a prepositional phrase. And so what is it modifying? Is it modifying the subject God? Is it modifying created? is it modifying the direct objects, heavens and the earth. And this is where diagramming kind of helps in your Bible study, because you have to really sit down and think about the roles that each of these clauses and phrases are playing, and in a lot of instances it's going to determine whether you have correct theology or wrong theology. And I don't say that in a way to be condescending, but a lot of theology has been made or broken because of simple things like prepositional phrases or what they were modifying, and you have debates over a lot of this stuff. But without getting into all that, we need to look at what this prepositional phrase here is modifying. And so I would have to say that it's modifying the subject, because no matter where else you put it in the sentence, it doesn't sound right. So if I say, well, it could be modifying the verb, God created in the beginning the heavens and the earth, or God in the beginning created the heavens and the earth. And I think that's more in line with what it's going, is it's modifying the subject God. And there would be some that would probably say, well, no, it's modifying the verb created. But in the beginning, it's giving us a time frame, what God did and when he did it. So I guess it could really go either way. And I've sat down and I've thought about this before, but I never conclusively said that it was creating, that it was modifying the subject. It kind of seems to flow naturally, and I guess it's just because it's at the very beginning. And I don't know enough Hebrew to know otherwise. So I'm taking an educated guess. But I think in this instance, it really is not going to make too much of a difference whether it modifies the subject or whether it modifies verb, because now that I'm thinking about it, it really could go with the verb. God created in the beginning the heavens and the earth. And I think, to me, it does kind of sound like more or less that it is modifying this verb created, because it's telling us when it happened. So I'm gonna go with and say that it's modifying the verb here. And so I'm going to use this one here, because when you are diagramming, we're going to pull this down a little bit here so it doesn't crowd this up. When you're diagramming a prepositional phrase, you're always going to have the preposition, and you're always going to have an object of the preposition. And again, we talked about how sometimes words can be used as objects that aren't necessarily complete. It doesn't seem to make sense, but here we got in, and then the preposition is a beginning. Now, this definite article is never going to be an object of a preposition. It's just modifying this word beginning. But we got this here, and we're going to slide this over to make a little bit more room so it's not as large. And there we go. We can actually bring it up here to bring it a little bit more in line. And then we just got this word here, the. And this is modifying beginning, because it's the beginning. And there we have Genesis 1:1 diagrammed. So the main idea here is God created the heavens and the earth. And then this is telling us, this prepositional telling us is when it was created, at what point in time, and it's in the beginning. So hope this has been another helpful video. Again, I'm not going to try to get into every single nuance of diagramming, just the very basics. And If you think I'm wrong on my diagram, hey, feel free to correct me. I don't care, and honestly, I don't say that in a sarcastic way. I'm being serious because I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who know diagramming a lot better than me, and so if I've done something that is not grammatically correct, feel free to correct me. So hopefully this has been helpful, and in our next video, we'll try to get into a little bit more complex things here. I do want to find some scripture that's going to have a lot of modifiers, a lot of different types of phrases, and some other things in it, like infinitives and participles and things like that. So I want to try and do that so I can show you how to diagram. And it's going to take a lot of practice. I still practice. I still regularly go to EnglishGrammarRevolution.com and always are trying to sharpen my skills a little bit better. But one of the things I do to help me is I try to do this a little bit every day. Even if I don't do a whole entire verse or a whole sentence, if I have a sentence that has several clauses, I might take a couple of those clauses a day and try and do that. But it really does help your mind think. It kind of helps you to think about the scriptures and kind of wrestle with some of the ideas. It's kind of the way you saw me do with created. I always kind of assumed that this prepositional phrase was modifying God, and mainly because it just fell right at the beginning of the sentence. But the more and more I thought about it, I realized, okay, well, it's kind of telling us when it was created, and so it would seem to be modifying the verb. And so that's just a way that diagramming can help you wrestle with a text and to help you in your Bible study. So again, I hope this has been helpful. Please give me any feedback, whether negative, whether positive. I really don't care. Believe me, I got tough skin. I'm not easily offended. So just give me a line, drop me some feedback, and I hope again that this has been very helpful for you, and we will continue to do another video, at least one more, maybe two, depending on how much feedback I get. So hope this has helped you guys. We'll see you later.